Sarah Chen had seen everything in 12 years as an ER nurse. Gunshot wounds at midnight, overdoses in bathroom stalls, children with bruises their parents couldn't explain. But she had never seen a man abandon his dying wife and pretend to be a stranger. Not until that Tuesday night, when David Rogers walked into County General carrying an unconscious woman, signed nothing, said 5 words that would destroy multiple lives, and disappeared into the rain. What Sarah didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the woman on the gurney wasn't who anyone thought she was.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The fluorescent lights of County General's emergency room hummed with their usual mechanical indifference, casting harsh shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. Sarah Chen moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her navy scrubs wrinkled from the double shift that had somehow become her normal. 12 hours had bled into 13, then 14, and the night showed no signs of mercy. She was updating a patient chart when the automatic doors burst open. A man stumbled through carrying a woman in his arms. The woman's head lolled back, her dark hair hanging limp, her skin the color of old newspaper. The man's face was slick with rain or sweat or both, his eyes wild with something Sarah had learned to recognize immediately: panic barely held in check. "Help!" he managed, the word coming out strangled. "She collapsed! She's not breathing right!" Sarah's training took over before a conscious thought. She called for a gurney, for Dr. Martinez, for anyone within earshot. 2 other nurses materialized from behind curtain dividers. They moved as one organism, transferring the woman from the man's trembling arms to the mobile bed, wheeling her toward Trauma Bay 3. The woman was in her late 20s, maybe 30. Attractive features now slack and lifeless. Her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. Sarah's fingers found the pulse point on her neck, thready and weak, like a bird's heartbeat trapped under skin. Dr. Martinez appeared, his gray hair disheveled from the previous emergency. He took one look at the patient and started barking orders: blood pressure, oxygen saturation, IV line, the familiar symphony of crisis response. Sarah worked alongside him, her hands steady despite the exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. She inserted the IV on the first try, started the saline drip, attached the monitoring equipment. The machines began their chorus of beeps and alarms, each sound a data point in the equation of whether this woman would live or die. "Pupils responsive but sluggish," Dr. Martinez muttered as he shined his pen light into the woman's eyes. "Blood pressure 70/40 and dropping. Temperatures elevated. Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. The woman's chest rose and fell in that terrible rhythm that suggested a body forgetting how to sustain itself. "Could be sepsis or acute renal failure. We need a full workup. CBC, comprehensive metabolic panel, urinalysis, and get me your medical history. Who brought her in?" Sarah's gaze snapped to the waiting area visible through the trauma bay's glass walls. The man who'd carried the woman inside stood near the intake desk, his entire body language screaming discomfort. He kept glancing at the exit doors, then back towards where they were working, then at the exit again. "I'll get the information," Sarah said, grabbing a clipboard with the standard intake forms. She pushed through the trauma bay door and approached the man. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with a lean build and the kind of exhaustion that suggested sleepless nights had become routine. His clothes were soaked, definitely rain she could see now, with the storm visible through the entrance doors behind him. "Sir?" Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm. "I need to get some information about the patient. Can you tell me her name?" The eyes met hers for just a second before sliding away. I don't know." "You don't know her name?" "No." Sarah felt the first prickle of something wrong. "Sir, you brought her in. You were carrying her." I picked her up." The words came out too fast, too rehearsed. "On the street, outside the 7-Eleven on Morrison Street. I was driving by and saw her fall. I put her in my car and brought her here." The story had the smooth edges of a lie. Sarah had heard thousands of lies in this emergency room. Lies about drug use, about domestic violence, about how that knife wound really happened. This had the same quality, and not necessarily malicious, but definitely not truth. "What's your name?" she asked. "Does it matter? I'm not family." "I still need your information. You transported her." The man's jaw tightened. David Rogers. Sarah wrote it down. "And you're certain you don't know her? Never seen her before?" "Never." "Mr. Rogers, she's in critical condition. We need to contact her family, find out her medical history. Does she have a purse, a phone, any identification?" There was nothing, just her on the sidewalk. Behind them, an alarm shrieked from the trauma bay. Sarah's head whipped around to see Dr. Martinez gesturing urgently. Through the glass, she could see the woman convulsing, her body arching off the gurney. "I have to go," Sarah said. "Don't leave. We'll need a full statement." She ran back to the trauma bay, the clipboard still clutched in her hand. The next 15 minutes dissolved into controlled chaos, administering anti-seizure medication, stabilizing the patient, watching the monitors for any sign that they were winning or losing this battle. When the woman finally stabilized, when her vitals had climbed back from the edge of the cliff, she took a breath and turned back toward the waiting area. David Rogers was gone. She walked to the intake desk where Marcy, the night receptionist, was processing a mountain of paperwork. "The man who brought in the Jane Doe? Did you see where he went?" Marcy looked up, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "The wet one. Yeah, he practically ran out of here about 10 minutes ago. Seemed real anxious to leave." She moved to the automatic doors and stepped out into the night. Rain pelted down in sheets, turning the parking lot into a maze of puddles reflecting sodium lights. She scanned the area, but there were dozens of cars and no way to know which one belonged to David Rogers, if that was even his real name. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather crept down her spine. Something was very wrong here. Men didn't just abandon unconscious women at emergency rooms and flee. Not unless they had something to hide. She went back inside, water dripping from her hair, and found Dr. Martinez reviewing the patient's preliminary blood work at the nurse's station. "Whoever she is, she's in kidney failure," Martinez said without looking up from the computer screen. "Advanced stage. Her creatinine levels are through the roof, and her GFR is about 15% of normal. She needs dialysis immediately and probably a transplant within the year if she wants to survive." "The man who brought her in left," Sarah said. "Claimed he didn't know her, that he'd just found her on the street. But I think he was lying." Martinez finally looked at her, his expression grave. "Well, we've got a bigger problem. Without family consent and without knowing her medical history, we're in a legal gray area for treatment. And kidney failure like this doesn't develop overnight. She's been sick for a while. Someone knows who she is. I got a name from him. David Rogers. Run it through the system. Check if she's in our database. Maybe she's been here before." Sarah spent the next hour doing exactly that. She checked every database the hospital had access to, ran facial recognition through the county's medical network, searched for any Jane Does matching the woman's description. Nothing. It was almost 3 in the morning when she finally pulled up the security footage from the parking lot cameras. The quality was grainy but good enough. She watched David Rogers' car pull up to the emergency entrance. A silver Honda Civic, maybe 10 years old. She zoomed in, enhanced the image, and captured the license plate number. Then she did something she probably shouldn't have done. She called her friend Marcus, a police officer who'd spent 2 weeks in this very ER after a shooting incident last year. She had sat with him during the long, terrifying hours when they weren't sure he'd keep his leg. He owed her, and more importantly, he trusted her. "Marcus, it's Sarah from County General. I need a favor." 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text message. The license plate belonged to David Rogers, age 32, with an address in the suburban neighborhood of Riverside. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants. Sarah stared at the address on her phone screen. Every protocol, every rule, every boundary of her professional responsibility told her to pass this information to hospital administration and let them handle it. This wasn't her job. She was a nurse, not a detective. but she kept seeing the woman's face. Kept imagining her waking up alone in a hospital room with no memory of how she got there, no one to hold her hand, no one to explain that her kidneys were failing and her life was measured in dialysis sessions and transplant lists. She kept seeing David Rogers' eyes sliding away from hers when he lied. The shift ended at 7. Sarah went home, showered, lay in bed staring at the ceiling for 2 hours without sleeping, and then got in her car and drove to Riverside. The house at 847 Maple Street looked like every other house on the block, modest, well-maintained, with a small front yard and a Toyota Camry in the driveway. Sarah sat in her car across the street, wondering what the hell she was doing. This was crazy. This was a violation of privacy laws, hospital protocol, and basic common sense. She should turn around, go home, and let the professionals handle it. But then the front door opened, and David Rogers stepped out. He wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, young, healthy, very much alive. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm with casual intimacy. The woman from the hospital had been abandoned by a man who went home to someone else. And suddenly Sarah realized this story was much darker than she'd thought.
Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she watched David Rogers and the woman, his girlfriend, wife, walk to the Camry. They looked like any normal couple running morning errands. The woman wore yoga pants and a light jacket, her blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. David looked different in daylight, less frantic, but the exhaustion was still visible in the slope of his shoulders. They drove away. Sarah waited 30 seconds, then followed at a distance. They went to a grocery store. Sarah parked several rows away and watched through the windshield as they disappeared inside. 15 minutes later, they emerged with paper bags full of what looked like ordinary domestic life: milk, bread, vegetables. This was insane. Sarah was following strangers like some kind of stalker. She was about to give up, drive home, and pretend this morning never happened, when David's companion got into the driver's seat. David stood by the passenger door, but he didn't get in. Instead, he leaned through the window, said something, then stepped back. The woman drove away alone. David stood in the parking lot for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He made a call, his face animated, almost angry. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. When it ended, he didn't go to his own car. Instead, he started walking toward the main road. Sarah made a split-second decision. She pulled out of her parking spot and drove toward him, slowing as she approached. She rolled down the passenger window. "David Rogers?" He spun around, shock flashing across his face when he saw her. Recognition followed immediately. She was still in her scrubs from the hospital. "Need a ride?" Sarah asked, her tone deliberately casual. What are you doing here?" "Same thing you did last night, making sure someone doesn't collapse on a sidewalk with no one to help them." The color drained from David's face. For a moment, Sarah thought he might run. Instead, he stood frozen on the sidewalk, rain from last night's storm still puddled around his feet. "How did you find me?" "Your license plate? Look, I'm not here to make trouble. I just need to understand what happened. That woman you brought in, she's dying. Her kidneys are failing. She needs family, medical history, consent for treatment. You abandoned her." "I didn't abandon anyone." The words came out defensive, almost desperate. "I don't know her, I told you." "You're lying," Sarah said it matter-of-factly. Not accusatory, but simply stating observable truth. "You carried her like she was precious, you knew exactly where the emergency entrance was, and now I find you live 15 minutes from the hospital. So either you're telling me the truth, and you're a good Samaritan who finds dying women on sidewalks, or you're lying, and that woman means something to you." David's facade crumbled. His shoulders sagged, his eyes squeezed shut, and for a horrible moment, Sarah thought he might cry right there on the sidewalk. "Get in," she said quietly. He did. They sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot while morning shoppers walked past, oblivious to the conversation happening behind closed windows. "Her name is Amanda," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Amanda Rogers. She's my wife." The admission hung in the air between them. "The woman I just saw you with? That's Emily, It's complicated." "I bet it is." David's hands twisted in his lap. "Amanda and I were married for 7 years. We were happy. We had plans. Buy a house, have kids, all the normal stuff. Then, 3 years ago, she started getting sick. At first, we thought it was just fatigue, maybe stress from her job, but it got worse. The doctors ran tests. Kidney disease. Genetic. Progressive. We fought it. God, we fought it so hard. Every treatment, every specialist, every experimental therapy anyone suggested. We sold our house to pay for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I took a second job. Amanda kept working as long as she could, but eventually she couldn't anymore. The dialysis made her so weak. Dialysis is expensive. $45,000 a year. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs buried us. We had to choose between dialysis and eating, between medication and keeping the electricity on. I worked 16 hours a day and still wasn't enough. And Emily? David's face twisted with guilt and shame. I met her at my second job. I'm a rideshare driver at night. She was regular passenger, worked late shifts at a call center. We'd talk during the drives. She was kind. She listened. She didn't know about Amanda at first. By the time she found out, I was already in love with her. I don't know. Dependent on her, maybe. She represented a version of my life that wasn't drowning in medical debt and death. I know how that sounds. I know what kind of person that makes me. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a complicated tangle of sympathy and revulsion. So you have a wife dying of kidney failure at home and a girlfriend who doesn't know the full story? Emily knows about Amanda. I told her 6 months ago. She said that she understood that she'd wait until things resolved themselves. The euphemism made Sarah's stomach turn. Until things resolved themselves. Until his wife died. What happened last night? Amanda collapsed in the bathroom. She had been feeling worse all week, but she refused to go to the hospital. She knew we couldn't afford it. We've already maxed out every credit card, borrowed from everyone we know. The hospital bills from her last admission are in collections. I get calls every day threatening lawsuits. David's voice grew quieter. When she collapsed, I panicked. I carried her to the car, but halfway to the hospital, I realized that if I admitted her as my wife, if I signed those forms, we'd be drowning in even more debt. The hospital would bill us for the emergency care, the ICU, the dialysis, tens of thousands more. We'd never recover. We'd lose everything. So you pretended to be a stranger.
I thought if she came in as a Jane Doe, the hospital would have to treat her, that the state would cover the costs, that maybe, for once, the system would help us instead of crushing us. Sarah felt her anger rising, though she tried to keep it in check. That's not how it works, David. Jane Does get emergency stabilization, but long-term care, kidney failure treatment, that requires consent, family involvement, insurance verification. You didn't save your family from medical debt. You just abandoned your wife when she needed you most. I know. The words came out broken. God, I know. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes trying to convince myself I was doing the right thing, telling myself it was about protecting our future, protecting what little we have left. But the truth is I was just a coward. I couldn't face another hospital admission, another mountain of bills, another step closer to losing everything. You already lost everything, Sarah said coldly. You just haven't realized it yet. David didn't argue. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah asked the question that had been building since David started talking. If you're so broke, how can you afford a girlfriend? How can you afford to live in Riverside? David's face flushed. Emily, she helps. She doesn't know how much. She thinks I'm just getting back on my feet after the divorce she thinks I'm going through. She's been letting me stay at her place, helping with expenses. She thinks Amanda is my ex-wife, who I'm still legally tied to because of medical debt. Jesus Christ. I know how it sounds, but what was I supposed to do? Let Amanda die faster because we couldn't afford rent and food? Emily's help kept us afloat. It kept Amanda alive for the last 6 months. Where does Amanda think you are when you're with Emily? Working, which isn't technically a lie. I still drive for Uber between both lives. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital, Dr. Martinez asking about the John Doe follow-up. She looked at David, this man who'd committed what might be the most human kind of betrayal.
the kind born from desperation and exhaustion and the slow erosion of hope. You need to come back to the hospital. Amanda needs proper treatment, and that requires you to be honest about who she is. The hospital has social workers, financial aid programs. It won't erase the debt, but it's better than her dying alone as a Jane Doe. They'll sue me for the bills. Probably. But your wife is dying, David. That should matter more than money. He was quiet for a long time. Then, what if I can't do it? What if I can't face her and admit what I did? Then you're even more of a coward than I thought. The harshness of her words seemed to snap something in David. He nodded slowly, resignation settling over his features. Okay, I'll come back. I'll sign whatever they need. But can you do something for me first? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Can you check on her? Make sure she's stable? I need to know she's okay before I walk back into that room and destroy whatever's left of us. Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. Sarah drove David back to the hospital, watching him in her peripheral vision. He looked like a man heading to his own execution. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But when they walked through the emergency room doors and Sarah checked on Amanda's status, her blood went cold. Amanda Rogers wasn't in her room. According to the system, she'd been discharged 3 hours ago, against medical advice, by a woman claiming to be her sister. A woman named Karen Mitchell. And when Sarah pulled up the security footage, her blood went cold. The woman who took Amanda from the hospital was Emily, the blonde girlfriend David had been with that morning. Nothing about this story was what it seemed.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah's hand trembled as she held the tablet showing the security footage. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m., less than an hour after David and Emily had left their house. In the grainy video, Emily stood at the nurse's station, signing paperwork with confident strokes. Beside her, Amanda Rogers sat in a wheelchair, looking disoriented, but conscious. "That's impossible," David breathed, staring at the screen over Sarah's shoulder. "Emily didn't know where Amanda was. I never told her I brought her here." Well, she found out somehow. Sarah scrolled through the discharge paperwork. The signature read Karen Mitchell in neat, practiced handwriting. She used a fake name, claimed to be Amanda's sister. Who the hell is Emily, really? David backed away from the tablet, his face ashen. "I don't understand. Why would she? Where does Emily live?" "Why?" "Because your wife just got taken by a woman pretending to be someone else, and you're the only one who knows where they might be." Sarah's voice had gone sharp, her nurse's instinct for triage kicking in. "Amanda needs medical care. She was an acute kidney failure. Taking her out of this hospital could kill her." David fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He pulled up his messages, scrolled to Emily's contact. "She texted me half an hour ago. Said she finished grocery shopping and was heading to the gym. She said I should take my time with my errands." "Call her." "And say what?" "I don't care. Anything. Just find out where she is." David dialed. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. A third time, nothing. "Give me her address." "I can't just. Your wife's life is in danger. Give me the damn address." David rattled off an address in the Riverside neighborhood, the same area where Sarah had followed them that morning. She was already moving toward the exit, David scrambling behind her. They took Sarah's car, speeding through mid-morning traffic with a recklessness that would have horrified her in any other circumstance. Sarah called Dr. Martinez on the way, explaining the situation as succinctly as she could. "That's kidnapping," Martinez said over the speakerphone. "Call the police." "And tell them what? That a woman who claimed to be family took a patient who wanted to leave. Amanda was barely conscious when she left. She couldn't have provided informed consent. Try proving that to a 911 dispatcher. By the time police get involved, sort through the he said, she said, and potentially get a warrant, Amanda could be dead. I'm 10 minutes away from the address. I'll call you when I know more." She hung up before Martinez could argue. David sat rigid in the passenger seat, his face a mask of confusion and fear. He kept repeating, "I don't understand. I don't understand how Emily knew. I never told her which hospital. I never even told her Amanda collapsed last night." "How long have you known Emily?" "About 18 months. And in 18 months,
You never thought it was strange that she was okay with you being married? That she was fine playing second fiddle to a dying woman? She said she understood, that she knew I had obligations. People don't fall in love with married men and patiently wait for their wives to die, David. That's not understanding. That's something else. They pulled onto Emily Street, a quiet row of duplexes with shared driveways and postage-stamped front lawns. Sarah spotted the Toyota Camry immediately, parked in front of Unit 847B. She and David approached the door. Sarah knocked, firmly but not aggressively. No answer. She knocked again, this time harder. "Emily," David called out. "Emily, it's me. Open up." Silence. Sarah tried the doorknob, locked. She peered through the front window, cupping her hands against the glass to block the glare. The living room was visible. Neat, modern furniture, nothing out of place. No sign of anyone inside. "Go around back," Sarah told David. "See if there's another entrance." While David circled the duplex, Sarah pulled out her phone and called 911. She reported a medical emergency, gave the address, explained that a critically ill woman had been taken from the hospital and might be at this location. The dispatcher promised to send officers. David reappeared, shaking his head. "Back door's locked too. Windows are all shot." "Could she have taken Amanda somewhere else?" "Where? Emily doesn't have family in the area. She moved here from Oregon about 2 years ago for work." 2 years. The timeline stuck in Sarah's mind like a splinter. What exactly does Emily do for work? She's a medical billing specialist. Works for a company that handles insurance claims for hospitals. Sarah's blood went cold. Which hospitals?
I don't know. A bunch of them. It's a regional company. Does she work for County General? David's eyes widened as the implications hit him. I never asked. Oh, God. You don't think... I think Emily had access to medical records. I think she knew exactly who was admitted to that hospital last night, and I think she's known about Amanda a lot longer than you told her. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb, lights flashing but no siren. 2 officers stepped out and Sarah quickly explained the situation. They requested permission to do a welfare check, which David, as the legal resident of Emily's guest room, granted. The officers forced the front door open with practiced efficiency. Sarah and David followed them inside, and what they found made Sarah's stomach drop. The duplex was empty, not just devoid of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no personal items, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. The walls were bare, the carpets marked with rectangular indentations where furniture had recently sat. In the kitchen, the refrigerator door hung open, revealing empty shelves. What the hell? David spun in a circle, taking in the vacant space. We were here this morning. This was a full apartment this morning. Where's her stuff? Where's my stuff? One of the officers, a middle-aged man with a name tag reading Officer Brennan, walked through the rooms methodically. He emerged from the bedroom, shaking his head. Property's been cleared out. Recent, too. You can see drag marks on the carpet where heavy furniture was moved. This was done fast, probably within the last few hours. That's impossible, David insisted. You can't empty an entire apartment in a few hours. You can if you have help and a plan, Officer Brennan said. Looks like whoever lived here knew they were leaving. This was premeditated. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Emily had taken Amanda from the hospital, then immediately cleared out her apartment. She'd lied about her name at the hospital. She worked in medical billing, giving her access to patient information, and she had inserted herself into David's life right around the time his financial troubles would have become apparent in medical billing records. David, did you ever see Emily's actual house before you started staying here? What? No, she said she was moving into this place right when we started getting serious. I helped her unpack some boxes. Did those boxes have her name on them? Old addresses? Anything to verify this was really her place? David's face went slack. There were just generic moving boxes, brown cardboard. I didn't think to check. Officer Brennan pulled out his radio. I'm going to run the address, see who the actual leaseholder is. You said the woman's name is Emily? Emily Sanderson. Then with less certainty. At least that's what she told me. While Officer Brennan made his calls, Sarah walked through the empty apartment, her nurse's eye cataloging details. In the bathroom, she found a single item left behind. A prescription bottle that had rolled under the vanity. She picked it up carefully. The label read, Amanda Rogers, prednisone, 10 milligrams, prescribed 3 months ago by Dr. Jennifer Walsh at County General. David, Sarah's voice cut through the confusion. "Come here." He joined her in the bathroom and she held up the bottle. The color drained from his face for the second time that day. "That's Amanda's medication. How did it get here?" "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that Emily has been in your house. Maybe more than once. Maybe many times. But I never brought her there. I always went to her place. Amanda didn't know about Emily. She thought I was just working." "Did Amanda ever mention anything missing? Items moved? Any signs someone had been in the house when you weren't home?" David's hands went to his head, fingers gripping his hair. "Amanda's been so out of it lately. The dialysis, the medication, it makes her confused sometimes. She's mentioned things not being where she left them, but I thought it was just the brain fog. Oh God, what has Emily done?" Officer Brennan returned, his expression grim. "Property manager says this unit has been empty for 4 months. The previous tenant moved out, and they've been renovating before putting it back on the market. No one named Emily Sanderson has ever lived at this address." "That's not possible," David said weakly. "I've been staying here for months. We had mail delivered here." "To a vacant unit that someone was squatting in or had unauthorized access to," Brennan said. "Sir, I think you've been part of an elaborate deception. We need to file a full report and start looking for your wife immediately." Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Martinez. She answered, and his voice came through urgent. "Sarah, we have a problem. I just got a call from the county medical examiner's office. They said they received an anonymous tip about a body matching Amanda Rogers' description, since she was found unresponsive at a residence on Lakewood Drive. I'm sending you the address now." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Is she live?" "They didn't say, but police and paramedics are en route. But Sarah, that address is registered to David Rogers." Sarah looked at David, whose face had gone beyond pale to a gray color that suggested shock setting in. "That's my house. The house Amanda and I lost to foreclosure 6 months ago. We've been living in a rental apartment since then. Why would Emily take her there?" Nobody had an answer. But as Sarah and David raced toward the address with police escort, a horrifying picture began to form in Sarah's mind. Emily hadn't been a girlfriend. She'd been something else entirely. Something predatory, something methodical. And Amanda had been the target all along. The house at 4523 Lakewood Drive looked exactly as David remembered it. The blue-gray siding, the oak tree in the front yard, where he and Amanda had planned to hang a tire swing for their future children, the house that they'd lost to medical debt. But as Sarah followed David and the police through the front door, unlocked, hanging slightly ajar, she smelled something that made her training scream warnings, the sharp chemical scent of medical equipment. They found Amanda in the master bedroom, connected to a dialysis machine, unconscious but alive. And sitting beside her, calm as a person attending a garden party, was Emily. Except when she spoke, her voice was different. Her accent was different, and the words she said made everyone in that room realize they'd all been players in a game whose rules they'd never understood. "Hello, David. I've been waiting for you to figure it out. I'm not Emily Sanderson. My name is Dr. Catherine Wells, and Amanda Rogers is my sister."
The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah felt like she'd stepped into an alternate reality where nothing made sense, and all the pieces that had almost fit together were suddenly wrong shapes entirely. David stood frozen in the bedroom doorway, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The police officers flanked him, hands hovering near their weapons but not drawing them. The scene was surreal but not immediately threatening. The woman they'd known as Emily sat in a folding chair beside the medical-grade dialysis machine, her posture relaxed, almost serene. But everything else about her was different now that Sarah looked closely. The California girl affect was gone, replaced by something sharper, more precise. Her eyes held a calculating intelligence that hadn't been visible before, or maybe Sarah just hadn't been looking. "You're lying," David finally managed. "Amanda's sister died. Karen. She died of the same kidney disease when they were teenagers. Amanda told me." "Karen did die," the woman said calmly. She stood moving with practiced grace around the IV lines and medical equipment. "I'm Catherine, the youngest sister. The one my parents never talked about because acknowledging me would have meant acknowledging what they did. Sarah's nurse instincts overrode her shock. She moved past the police officers to check Amanda's vital signs. The dialysis machine was running properly, the blood flow steady, all the connections secure. Amanda was unconscious but stable, more stable, in fact, than she'd been at the hospital. "Don't worry," Catherine said. "I'm not trying to hurt her. I'm trained in nephrology. This is a properly administered dialysis session. She'll wake up in about an hour feeling better than she has in weeks." "You kidnapped her from a hospital," Officer Brennan said, his hand still in his holster. "That's a felony." "I saved her from a hospital that was going to let her die because she couldn't pay. There is no legal mechanism to charge me when I have committed no actual harm." Catherine's smile was cold. "But please, call for backup. File your reports. This is all going to become very public very soon, and I want everyone to know exactly what happened here." Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking Amanda's pupils, her pulse, the dialysis catheter site. Everything was professionally done. Whoever this woman was, she knew exactly what she was doing medically. "I don't understand," David said, his voice breaking. "If you're Amanda's sister, why all the lies? Why pretend to be someone else? Why seduce me?" "Because I needed to understand who you were." Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. "I needed to know if you were worth saving along with her, or if you were part of the problem. Start from the beginning," Officer Brennan commanded, "and don't move from that spot." Catherine nodded, settling back into her chair with the air of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Amanda and I had 3 sisters growing up. Karen, who died at 16 from polycystic kidney disease, Rachel, who died at 22 from the same disease, and me, Catherine, the youngest, the one my parents never talked about because acknowledging me would have meant acknowledging what they did." Her voice remained steady, but Sarah could hear the decades-old anger underneath it. "By the time I was 18, I had educated myself. I knew I had the same genetic condition. I knew I'd end up the same way unless I did something different. So I left, put myself through college, then medical school, specializing in nephrology. I wanted to understand the disease that killed my sisters. I wanted to save people like them." "Amanda never mentioned you, because she thought I was dead too. Our parents told her I died in a car accident when I was 19. Easier than admitting their youngest daughter, rejected their beliefs, and chose medical science. But I've been watching Amanda for years, following her medical records, tracking her progression. When her kidney function started declining 3 years ago, I knew I had to act." Sarah's mind raced ahead, filling in gaps. "The medical billing company. You had access to her records." "I didn't just have access. I created the situation that gave me access. I founded that medical billing company specifically to monitor patients with renal failure in this region. I've been tracking Amanda's treatment, watching as the American healthcare system slowly crushed her and David under the weight of medical debt." Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown lawn of the foreclosed house. "I watched them lose their savings, their home, their dignity. I watched David work himself into exhaustion trying to keep his wife alive in the system designed to profit from suffering. And I had to know, was he worth saving? Or was he another person who'd eventually abandon her when the cost became too high?" "So you seduced him? You created the Emily persona to test him?" "I gave him an exit ramp. A beautiful woman with her own money, no medical problems, no complications. A chance to walk away from the financial ruin and emotional devastation of watching his wife die. I wanted to see if he'd take it." David's face crumbled. "I did take it. I abandoned her at the hospital because I couldn't face more debt. You were right about me." "No," Catherine said sharply. "You brought her to the hospital. You could have let her die at home, where no one would ask questions, where no one would bill you. But you carried her through those doors because despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the debt and the despair, you could not let her go. That's what I needed to know." She turned back to face them, and for the first time Sarah saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes, something that might have been approval or relief, or the ghost of forgiveness. The Emily test wasn't about whether you'd be attracted to another woman. It was about whether you'd stay when it mattered most. Last night in that parking lot, you could have driven away entirely, left her at the emergency room entrance and disappeared. But you didn't. You walked in with her. You asked for help. That's why I decided to move forward with the rest of my plan. What plan? Officer Brennan demanded. Catherine walked to a briefcase Sarah hadn't noticed before, sitting on the bedroom dresser. She opened it and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Amanda needs a kidney transplant. She's been on the UNOS waiting list for 18 months, but her blood type is rare and her antibody profile makes matching difficult. She could wait 5 years, 10 years, or die before a suitable organ becomes available through the standard system. She handed the folder to Sarah, who flipped through it with growing disbelief. Medical records, genetic testing results, compatibility screenings. I'm a perfect match. Same blood type, same tissue markers, minimal antibody incompatibility. I've been screened and cleared for living donation. I can give her my kidney, and she'll survive. But there was one problem. What problem? David asked. The American medical system won't perform a living donation without proof of relationship or significant documentation of the donor's motivations. Anonymous donation is possible, but given Amanda's financial situation, no transplant center would prioritize her case. The system is designed to serve those who can pay, not those who need it most. Catherine's jaw tightened. I've spent 3 years trying to work within the system. I've offered to pay for Amanda's transplant outright. But anonymously, the hospitals won't accept it. They need liability protection, proof that I'm not being coerced or compensated illegally. I've tried to contact Amanda directly, but our parents poisoned that well. She thinks I'm dead, and even if she knew I was alive, she'd never accept help from the sister who abandoned the family. Sarah was beginning to understand the elaborate nature of what had been orchestrated. So you created Emily to get close to David to evaluate him and position yourself to intervene. And I set up this situation, the abandonment, the Jane Doe admission, the dramatic rescue, to force everyone's hand. Now there's a public record of Amanda being abandoned by her husband, taken by a mysterious woman, and ending up in her foreclosed home receiving unauthorized medical care. The media will eat this story alive. Officer Brennan's face darkened. You're orchestrating a media circus? I'm creating leverage. Catherine's voice was steel.
You're destroying my life, David said numbly. I'm weaponizing your story to change the system. Catherine's expression was fierce. By tomorrow morning, your faces will be everywhere. The public outcry will be massive. And in the middle of that storm, I'll step forward as Amanda's long-lost sister, a kidney donor match who's been prevented from saving her sister's life by bureaucratic red tape and systemic greed. I'll offer to donate and pay for the entire transplant. Sarah saw it then, the entire chess game Catherine had been playing. No hospital will refuse you, not with the national media watching, not when refusing means letting a woman die while her sister begs to donate a kidney. Exactly. The story is too good, too heartbreaking, too politically charged. Someone will perform the transplant, probably within the week. The hospital that does it will look like heroes. David will look like a complicated figure, a man who failed but also stayed, who abandoned but also loved. And Amanda will get the kidney that saves her life. This is insane, Officer Brennan said. You've committed multiple felonies to engineer a media manipulation campaign. Prove which felonies. I had legal access to this foreclosed property. I bought it at auction 2 months ago under a corporate entity. Amanda came here willingly once she regained consciousness this morning. I'm providing legitimate medical care as a licensed physician. And the only kidnapping was taking my own sister from a hospital that was going to discharge her to die because she couldn't afford continued treatment. Catherine's smile was sharp as broken glass. Charge me if you want. I'll plead guilty and give interviews from jail about how I had to break laws to save my sister because the American healthcare system is designed to let poor people die. You'll make me a folk hero. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the dialysis machine and Amanda's steady breathing.
Sarah found herself in the strange position of being simultaneously horrified by Catherine's methods and awestruck by the precision of her plan. David broke the silence, his voice small. "Does Amanda know that you're her sister?" "Not yet. She thinks Emily brought her here. She's been in and out of consciousness. I wanted to wait until you arrived to tell her the truth. She deserves to hear the full story with everyone present." "Why did you really need me here? If your plan works, if Amanda gets the transplant, she'll hate me for what I did, for abandoning her, for lying about Emily, for all of it." Catherine's expression softened slightly, the first genuine emotion she had seen from her. "Because despite everything, she loves you, and she'll need you during the recovery. A kidney transplant isn't a cure. It's trading one disease for another that's more manageable. She'll need anti-rejection medications for life, regular monitoring, continued support. I can give you my kidney, but I can't give you what you've given her for 7 years. Someone who stays." "I didn't stay. I ran. And then you came back. That's more than most people do." Before anyone could respond, Amanda stirred on the bed. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Sarah immediately moved to her side, slipping into her nurse role automatically. "Take it easy," Sarah said gently. "You're safe. You're on dialysis right now, but you're stable." Amanda's gaze wandered around the room, landing on David. "David? Where? Is this our house? Why are we in our house?" "Amanda." David moved to the other side of the bed, his eyes brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Amanda's confusion deepened as she saw the police officers, then Sarah, then finally Catherine. Recognition flickered across her face, not of identity, but of familiarity. "Emily? What's going on? Why are the police here?" Catherine pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, her movements careful and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than Sarah had heard it all day. "Amanda, my name isn't Emily. It's Catherine. Catherine Wells. I'm your sister." Amanda's face went blank with shock. "That's not possible. Catherine died. My parents said—" "Your parents lied. I left, and they told you I was dead because it was easier than admitting I rejected their beliefs. But I've been alive this whole time, watching you, protecting you when I could, and now I'm here because I can save your life." The next 20 minutes dissolved into explanations, revelations, tears. Catherine told Amanda everything about faking her death, about medical school, about the years of searching for a way to help without revealing herself. David confessed his abandonment at the hospital, his relationship with Emily, the financial desperation that had driven him to impossible choices. Sarah watched it all unfold with the strange detachment of someone observing a play where the emotional stakes were so high that they became almost abstract. Officer Brennan made phone calls, consulted with his superiors, ultimately deciding that sorting out the legal mess would require detectives and lawyers far above his pay grade. Through it all, Amanda remained quiet, processing information that was rewriting her understanding of her entire life. Finally, she looked at Catherine with tears streaming down her face. "You're really my sister? You're really alive?" "I'm really alive, and I'm really going to give you my kidney. I can't accept that. I can't let you." "You don't have a choice. It's already decided. The question is whether you're willing to let me back into your life after I'm no longer just an organ donor, but your sister again." Amanda reached out a trembling hand. Catherine took it. And in that moment, I saw what all of Catherine's cold calculation had been building toward. A reunion, years in the making, engineered through deception and manipulation, but rooted in a love that had survived death announcements and decades of separation. But just as the pieces seemed to fall into place, just as the impossible story started to make terrible sense, Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Martinez, his voice tight with urgency. "Sarah, we have a massive problem. The story just broke, but not the way anyone expected. Someone leaked the full medical records, including Amanda's DNA profile. And Catherine Wells is not a genetic match.
She's not Amanda's sister. The tissue typing in those documents, it's falsified. I don't know who this woman really is, but she's been lying about everything. And if she donates that kidney, Amanda will reject it within days. It will kill her.
The blood drained from Sarah's face as Dr. Martinez's words echoed in her mind. She looked at Catherine, who had frozen mid-embrace with Amanda, something shifting in her expression. Was it guilt? Fear? Or something else entirely? "Say that again," Sarah said into the phone, her voice deadly quiet. "Catherine Wells is not a genetic match for Amanda Rogers. The DNA doesn't match for siblings. It doesn't even match for distant relatives. Whoever she is, she's not related to Amanda at all." Sarah ended the call. The room had gone silent. Everyone had heard enough of the conversation to know something was catastrophically wrong. "You're not her sister," Sarah said flatly. Catherine slowly released Amanda's hand and stood. The mask of gentle emotion slid away, replaced by something harder to read, not cold calculation this time, but something more complex. Resignation mixed with defiance. "No," Catherine admitted, "I'm not." The word hit the room like a detonation. David lunged forward, but Officer Brennan caught him, holding him back as he shouted, "Who the hell are you? What is this?" "Sit down," Catherine said calmly, "all of you, because the real story is so much stranger than what you've been told, and Amanda deserves to hear it before anyone else." "I'm calling this in," Officer Brennan said, reaching for his radio. "Wait." The voice came from Amanda, weak but clear. She had pushed herself up slightly on the bed, her eyes locked on Catherine. "Let her talk. I need to understand." Officer Brennan hesitated, then nodded, but kept his hand on his radio. Catherine took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight of truth that all her previous words had lacked. "My real name is Dr. Catherine Kim. I'm a nephrologist at Stanford Medical Center, and 3 years ago I killed someone." The room erupted, but Catherine held up a hand. "Not murdered, killed. There's a difference, and it matters." She continued, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I had a patient named Rachel Wells, 29 years old, polycystic kidney disease, identical to Amanda's case. Rachel had been on the transplant list for 4 years. Her kidneys were failing rapidly. She had maybe 6 months left. And then we found a match, a deceased donor, perfect compatibility, everything aligned. Rachel was going to live." Catherine's jaw tightened. But Rachel's insurance company denied coverage for the transplant. They called it not medically necessary because experimental treatments might extend her life for a few more months. They wanted her to try those first. By the time we could fight the denial, appeal through 3 levels of bureaucracy, and get it overturned, 8 weeks had passed. The donor kidney went to someone else. Rachel died 3 months later in a hospital bed, drowning in her own fluids because her body couldn't process them anymore. The pain in Catherine's voice was raw, unfiltered. "I held her hand when she died. She was the same age as me. She had a husband, a 5-year-old daughter, and she died because an insurance algorithm decided her life wasn't cost-effective to save." "That's tragic," Sarah said quietly. "But what does that have to do with Amanda?" "Everything. Because after Rachel died, I started looking at the data. I pulled records from hospitals across the country, kidney disease patients, transplant denials, insurance obstacles. I found hundreds of cases like Rachel's. Thousands. People dying not because medicine can't save them, but because the system won't let it happen unless they can pay." Catherine walked back to her briefcase and pulled out another folder. "And then I found Amanda. Same disease progression as Rachel, same blood type, same insurance company that denied Rachel's transplant, now denying Amanda's coverage for optimal care. I saw Rachel's death happening all over again, and I couldn't let it happen. I wouldn't." "So you invented the sister story," David said hollowly. "I invented everything. I researched Amanda's family history and discovered that she really did have sisters who died of kidney disease. I learned that there really was a Catherine who supposedly died young. I built a narrative that would be believable, that would give me a reason to be Amanda's donor.
Because here's the truth that no one wants to acknowledge. I'm actually a perfect match for Amanda. Sarah's head snapped up. Martinez said the DNA proves we're not related, but tissue compatibility isn't about family relationships. It's about HLA markers, blood antigens, antibody profiles. I ran every test. I'm a 6-antigen match for Amanda, the same level of compatibility as an identical twin. The transplant would work. Her body wouldn't reject my kidney. Then why lie about being her sister? Amanda asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because the transplant ethics boards won't approve living donations from strangers to patients who can't prove they'll afford the post-transplant care. There's too much liability, too much risk that the recipient will die from lack of follow-up treatment, wasting a perfectly good organ. But family donations get approved faster, with fewer questions, especially when the donor is paying for everything. Catherine's hands clenched into fists. I've spent 2 years trying to work within the system. I offered to donate anonymously through the Paired Exchange Program. Denied. I offered to pay for Amanda's entire transplant in lifetime care up front. Denied, without proof of relationship. I even tried to adopt Amanda legally as an adult so I could be family. Laughed out of the courthouse. The system is designed to prevent exactly what I'm trying to do. Save someone who can't afford to be saved. So you built an elaborate con, Officer Brennan said. Seduced her husband, faked a kidnapping, planned a media circus, all to force the system's hand. Yes, because Rachel died following the rules. She died because we all believed the system would work if we just waited long enough, appealed enough times, filled out enough forms. I won't make that mistake again. Sarah's mind was reeling. Everything she'd thought she understood about the situation had been wrong, or rather, had been both wrong and right simultaneously. Catherine was a liar, a manipulator, someone who'd committed multiple crimes. But she was also someone trying to save a life in a system designed to let people die. The media story, Sarah said. It was going to come out that you're not really her sister. Eventually, yes, but not until after the transplant. By then, it wouldn't matter. Amanda would have my kidney, she'd be recovering, and the truth would just add to the story. A stranger so moved by the system's cruelty that she impersonated a dead woman to save someone she'd never met. The narrative works either way.
You're insane, David said. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only person in this room who's actually sane, who sees clearly how broken everything is. Catherine turned to Amanda. I know I've lied to you. I know nothing about this is what you thought it was, but the kidney is real. The compatibility is real, and my offer is real. Let me save your life. Amanda stared at this stranger who'd orchestrated such an elaborate deception out of conviction and trauma and a desperate need to prevent another death. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Why me? Amanda whispered. Out of all the people dying of kidney disease, why did you choose me? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because you looked like Rachel. Same smile in your old photos, same way of tilting your head. Your husband's name was even similar. Rachel's husband was Daniel. When I found your case file, it felt like the universe was giving me a second chance. A chance to save Rachel by saving you. I know that's not rational. I know you're not her. But I couldn't let you die the way she did. I couldn't. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. Sarah realized she was witnessing something rare, the moment when a person's carefully constructed armor finally cracked, revealing the wounded human underneath. Officer Brennan cleared his throat. Dr. Kim, I need to place you under arrest. You've admitted to fraud, impersonation, and multiple other crimes. You have the right to stay silent. Wait, Amanda interrupted. Wait, please. Everyone turned to look at her. She had struggled to a sitting position, still connected to the dialysis machine, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in days. If she's arrested, the transplant won't happen. That's what you're telling me, right? The system will shut down the possibility because she broke the rules. Amanda, she's not your sister, David said gently. Everything was a lie. Was it? Amanda looked at Catherine. You said you've been watching me for 3 years. Monitoring my records, tracking my treatment, you built an entire false identity. You seduced my husband to evaluate him. You bought our foreclosed house. You planned this intervention down to the minute. That's not what strangers do for each other. That's what family does. Maybe not blood family, but family nonetheless. Catherine's eyes glistened. I'm not Rachel. I can't replace your sisters. No, Amanda agreed. But you can be my sister from now on. If you want to be. If that's allowed. Sarah found herself unexpectedly moved. This was not how these situations were supposed to resolve. There should be clear good guys and bad guys, obvious right and wrong choices. Instead, there was just a collection of broken people trying to survive in a system designed to crush them. Amanda, Sarah said carefully, the transplant won't be approved now, not with everything that's happened. The ethics board will shut it down. Unless, Catherine said slowly, the media story changes. If instead of stranger pretends to be sister, the narrative becomes stranger becomes sister to save a life, we might have a chance. The public outcry would be even stronger. A woman so desperate to prevent another death that she's willing to risk everything, including prison, to donate her kidney. You're still talking about manipulating the story, Officer Brennan said. I'm talking about telling the truth in a way that creates the political pressure necessary to make the impossible possible. Yes, that's manipulation. It's also the only way this works. David had been silent, processing everything. Now he spoke up, his voice heavy with exhaustion. What happens to me in this story? The husband who abandoned his dying wife? It depends, Catherine said. Do you want to be the villain who ran, or the complicated man who stumbled but came back? The choice is yours. I can give Amanda my kidney, but I can't give her the 7 years of history you two share. She'll need you during recovery. She'll need you after. The question is whether you can forgive yourself enough to be there.
The story broke 3 hours later, but not the way Catherine had originally planned. Instead of a calculated media manipulation, what emerged was something messier and more human. A story with no clear heroes or villains, just people making desperate choices in an unjust system. The journalists Catherine had contacted did publish the story, but they published all of it. Amanda's medical crisis, David's abandonment and affair, Catherine's elaborate deception and her motivations, the fact that she wasn't biologically related but was a perfect tissue match, Rachel Wells' death and how it had catalyzed everything. The response was immediate and overwhelming. News networks picked it up within hours. Social media exploded with debates about healthcare, medical ethics, living donation, and the morality of breaking rules to save lives. Some people called Catherine a hero. Others called her a criminal. Most called her both. But beneath the debate was a current of recognition. Millions of Americans saw their own experiences reflected in this story. The medical debt that destroyed families, the insurance denials that killed people, the choice between financial ruin and watching loved ones die. The fact that someone had been desperate enough to commit fraud just to donate an organ exposed something rotten in the system itself. Within 48 hours, 3 different transplant centers had contacted Catherine offering to perform the surgery. County General, desperate to repair their public image after the story of Amanda's abandonment went viral, made the most aggressive offer. They would cover all costs, waive all fees, and provide lifetime post-transplant care for Amanda. They would even arrange legal immunity for Catherine in exchange for her full cooperation and a documentary crew following the transplant process. "They're using us," David said when the offer came through. He and Sarah were sitting in County General's cafeteria, exhausted from 2 days of police interviews, legal consultations, and media attention. Of course they are, but Catherine's been using everyone too. Amanda's being used, you're being used. At this point, the question isn't whether we're part of someone's agenda, it's whether we can get what we need out of it. David stirred his coffee without drinking it. I keep thinking about what Catherine said, about me being a coward who ran. She's right. She's partially right, Sarah corrected. You made a terrible choice in that parking lot,
But you also worked 2 jobs for years to keep Amanda alive. You sold your house. You sacrificed everything until there was nothing left to sacrifice. That's not cowardice. That's loving someone so much it breaks you. Then why did I abandon her? Because humans have a breaking point. Because the system pushed you past yours. Because sometimes there are no good choices, only bad ones and worse ones, and you picked the one you thought you could live with. Sarah met his eyes. The question isn't whether you broke. Everyone breaks eventually. The question is what you do after. David was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm going to stay. Through the transplant, through recovery, through whatever comes next. I owe her that much. You don't owe her. You love her. There's a difference. Maybe. Sarah left David in the cafeteria and went to check on Amanda, who was being prepped for the transplant scheduled for the next morning. Catherine was there too, sitting beside the bed, both women talking quietly. How are you feeling? Terrified, grateful, confused, all of it at once. Amanda managed a weak smile. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. That first night, when David brought me in and ran, you could have just let me be another Jane Doe, filed the report, moved on to the next patient. But you didn't. You tracked David down. You followed this story until it couldn't be ignored anymore. Why? I considered the question carefully. Because I've been a nurse for 12 years and I've watched the system fail people every single day. Patients who can't afford medications, families destroyed by medical debt, people dying because they're afraid of the bills. After a while, you get numb to it. You tell yourself it's not your job to fix the system, just to care for the patients in front of you. She paused, organizing her thoughts. But when David ran, when I saw the panic in his eyes and realized he was abandoning someone he loved because he literally couldn't afford to save her, something broke in me. Or maybe something woke up. I couldn't just file the report and move on, not this time. So you broke the rules too. You violated privacy protocols, followed David without authorization, inserted yourself into a situation that wasn't your responsibility. Yes, I did. And if you could go back knowing everything that happened, would you do it differently? I thought about that first night. About David's face in the parking lot, about Amanda convulsing in the trauma bay. I thought about Catherine's elaborate deception and David's terrible choice and Amanda's fight to survive. I thought about a system so broken that good people had to become criminals just to help each other. No, she said finally, I wouldn't change anything because if I had followed the rules, Amanda would be dead by now. And maybe the rules that require people to die are rules that deserve to be broken. The transplant surgery took place the next morning in an operating room that had been transformed into a media event. Cameras were kept out of the sterile field, but documentary crews filmed everything else. Catherine being prepped for surgery, Amanda being wheeled in, David waiting in the hallway with his head in his hands. Sarah wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't assigned to the surgical unit. But Dr. Martinez had pulled strings to get her observing privileges. You started this, he said. You should see how it ends. The surgery took 7 hours. Both patients came through successfully. Catherine's kidney, implanted in his body, began producing urine within minutes. The first sign of the transplant was working. The surgeons closed Amanda up with the knowledge that if her body didn't reject the organ, she had a real chance at a normal lifespan. In the recovery room, as Amanda slowly emerged from anesthesia, David was there holding her hand. When her eyes opened, the first thing she saw was his face. Hey, he whispered. Hey, she whispered back. I'm sorry. For everything. For running, for lying, for not being strong enough. I know. Me too. Why are you sorry? You didn't do anything wrong. I got sick. I let this disease take everything from us. Our house, our savings, our future. That's not your fault. And running wasn't entirely yours. We both got crushed by something bigger than us. They sat in silence for a moment, holding on to each other in a world that had tried so hard to tear them apart. 3 rooms away, Catherine was also waking up, also in recovery. Sarah sat beside her bed, monitoring her vitals, watching for any sign of complications. Did it work? She asked groggily. The kidney is functioning. Amanda is going to live. Catherine closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. Good. That's good. You know you're probably going to jail for this, right? The DA is still deciding what charges to file. I know. But Amanda is alive. Rachel's been avenged in some small way. And maybe, just maybe, enough people saw this story that something might actually change.
Sarah doubted that. The system was too big, too entrenched, too profitable to change because of one viral story. But she didn't say that. Instead, she said, "You saved someone who needed saving. That matters." Did I? Or did I just prove that the only way to save people in America is to lie, cheat, and manipulate the system until it gives you what basic human compassion should have provided freely? Maybe both things are true. Then we're all damned. Maybe, but we're damned people who sometimes save each other anyway. The story continued to evolve over the following weeks. Catherine was charged with fraud and identity theft, but offered a plea deal that involved community service and public speaking about healthcare reform rather than prison time. The DA's office knew that jailing her would create a public relations nightmare. David and Amanda stayed together, working through the trauma and rebuilding trust slowly. Amanda's recovery was long but successful. The kidney functioned normally, and with proper medication and monitoring, her prognosis was good. Sarah went back to her shifts at County General, returning to the exhausting routine of emergency medicine. But something had changed. She saw every patient differently now, wondered about their stories, their struggles, the impossible choices they might be facing. She also started volunteering with a healthcare advocacy group, pushing for policy changes that would prevent other families from facing the same crisis. It felt like shouting into the void, but at least it was shouting. 6 months after the transplant, Sarah received a letter from Amanda. It was simple, handwritten on plain paper. Dear Sarah, I'm writing to thank you for saving my life. Not the medical part. Catherine's kidney did that and the surgical team at County General. But you saved me in a different way. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for me when no one else would. You broke rules that deserved breaking. David and I are doing better. We're not perfect, and we probably never will be, but we're learning to forgive each other for being human, for breaking under pressure, and for doing things we're not proud of. Catherine visits once a month. It's strange having a sister I never knew existed, but also wonderful. She's family now, in the way that matters. The system that almost killed me is still broken. Other people are still dying because they can't afford to live. But because of you, I'm not one of them. And maybe that's all any of us can do. Save the person in front of us and hope it somehow ripples outward. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being unwilling to accept that my death was inevitable just because I was poor. With gratitude, Amanda. Sarah kept that letter in her locker at the hospital. On the hardest days, when the system ground people down and she felt powerless to help, she would take it out and read it. A reminder that individual actions mattered, even in a broken system. That sometimes breaking the rules was the only moral choice. That choosing to see people, to fight for them, to refuse to accept their deaths as inevitable, that was the real medicine. The American healthcare system remained broken. Insurance companies still denied necessary treatments, medical debt still destroyed families, people still died because they couldn't afford to live. But Amanda Rogers wasn't one of them. And in the end, in a story with no clear heroes and no simple answers, perhaps that was enough. One life saved by people who refused to accept that profits mattered more than people. One woman who lived because strangers became family, because a husband who fled came back, because a nurse wouldn't look away. The system hadn't changed, but within its crushing machinery, a few people had managed to save each other anyway. And they had done it not by following the rules, but by remembering that rules exist to serve humanity, not the other way around. When the rules fail to protect human life, when the system makes morality impossible, when following protocol means watching someone die, perhaps the only ethical choice is to become a criminal. Perhaps the only way to be truly human is to be willing to break when necessary, to lie when truth serves cruelty, to manipulate when honesty perpetuates injustice. It wasn't a comfortable truth. It wouldn't inspire policy changes or reform legislation. But it was real and raw and painfully human. Sarah closed the letter and returned it to her locker.
Her shift was starting. There would be more patients, more impossible situations, more people trapped between dying and financial ruin. She couldn't save them all, but she could save the one in front of her, and then the next one, and the one after that. It wasn't much, but in a world built on indifference, even small acts of witnessing, of caring, of refusing to turn away, they mattered. They had to matter, because if they didn't, if individual choices made no difference against institutional cruelty, then there was no point to any of it. Amanda Rogers lived. That was the beginning and end of the story. Everything else, the deception, the abandonment, the manipulation, the media circus, all of it was just noise surrounding one simple, profound fact. A woman who was dying continued to live. And sometimes, in America's broken healthcare system, that simple miracle required extraordinary lies, desperate choices, and good people willing to become criminals for the sake of compassion. The moral wasn't clean, the ending wasn't happy, but it was true. And truth, however uncomfortable, was better than the fiction that everything works if you just follow the rules and trust the system. The system had failed Amanda Rogers, but people, flawed, desperate, imperfect people, had saved her anyway. That was the real story, not the perfect headline or the inspiring narrative, but the messy, complicated, morally ambiguous truth of how humans survive systems designed to destroy them. They lie, they break, they manipulate, they abandon and return. They become strangers and then become family. They violate protocols and cross boundaries and do things they're not proud of. And sometimes, if they're lucky, if they're persistent, if they're willing to risk everything, they save each other. That was enough. It had to be enough. Sarah walked onto the floor, ready for her shift, carrying Amanda's letter like a talisman against despair. Somewhere in the city, Amanda was living. David was learning to forgive himself. Catherine was speaking at healthcare reform rallies, turning her crime into advocacy. The emergency room doors opened, a new patient arrived, a new crisis began. And Sarah Chen, 12-year veteran nurse who'd learned that sometimes the only way to help was to break the rules, stepped forward to do what she had always done: witness suffering, provide care, and refuse to accept that death was inevitable just because someone couldn't afford life. The work continued. The fight continued. The broken system ground on. But within it, in small pockets of resistance and compassion, people kept saving each other anyway. One life at a time, one impossible choice at a time, one broken rule at a time. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in a world designed to make you feel powerless, something was revolutionary. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.